Hello and welcome to Shhh, the talk show, where we talk about taboos and change minds one conversation at a time. If you enjoy our episodes and believe in what we're trying to do, please click the subscribe button because it helps us reach more people. We encourage you to please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we also have our own blog page where you can actually share your personal story and help someone else. It's called shhthetalkshow.wordpress.com. Please watch the ads that roll before and after this episode because it helps us make a little much needed money off YouTube. And we also welcome any donations and sponsorships that will help us run this project, which is very much a voluntary exercise. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Shhh, the talk show. And as always, we have a wonderful patron of locations who has come through for us, made it very easy for us to shoot this season. We are shooting at Thoughts, which is an interior decor concept store. And it's a wonderful place. It's on Havelock Road. You can come and check it out. We've got different lovely settings, living room settings that are ready-made and beautiful for the show, and also for your home or whatever property you might be building right now. If you want some nice interior decor ideas, furniture designs, looks and spaces, just come and have a look at Thoughts. So we thank Tricia, who is the proprietress of Thoughts, for giving us this space to shoot at. We wanted to talk about a human right that we all sometimes forget, and that is the right to be human, the right to be seen as a whole and perfect human, with the same emotions, with the same feelings, with the same needs, with the same challenges that we all struggle with. And when it comes to this conversation of what is human, what is normal? That's like a loaded question in today's world. What exactly is normal? Because we've all got varied forms of normalcy. That is our reality, right? So when you explore the conversation of normal versus what is not normal, or another word we use sometimes is disability. What is disability? And who is really disabled? What is that experience like? It's not just about disability that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk specifically about disability and relationships, disability and dating, because I think in Sri Lanka, whenever we hear a conversation around disability, it's always about one form of inaccess or the other. It's like about employment, equality in employment, or maybe rights in a certain way, in political rights or financial rights. But we never really consider the fact that people living with disability are as normal or as human as everyone else and has the same needs, i.e. the need to be loved, the need to love, the need to feel that they have a companion in their lives, that need for companionship, that need to belong. We often ignore this about that part of the life of a person with disability. We don't talk about it, and that's why I was curious to know what the struggles are, what the challenges are. Are they the same as it is for people who don't have pronounced disabilities? And so my two guests today, we have the wonderful Niluka, who is quite vocal and quite active in advocating for disability rights, as well as she's a lecturer and she educates. And then on my other side, I have Ishan Jalil, who's also somebody that I got to know quite a number of years ago when he adopted a dog that I had rescued, and that's the first time I met Ishan. And Ishan has year on year has amazed me with the stuff that he's been doing with his life, and how big a voice he also has become for persons with disability. People with disability finding romance. It's almost like, and forgive me if I say this, but there is this kind of, social attitude that people with disability don't need to fall in love. What do you all think about that? I'm sure you all must be sensitive to that thought or that attitude. Are you? Have you ever felt like that, Ishan?
Yeah, like, so sometimes when I have, when I kind of make jokes with friends and all, sometimes friends say, okay, this guy, like, they kind of imply that, some ugly girl might end up, having a relationship with me because, I'll not see the girl and, she'll not see that, as in I'll not say that she's ugly, whatever, right? So these are very, these are kind of um, socially ingrained ideas which are kind of coming out in the form of jokes and day-to-day conversations. But then, yeah, like I have gone through so many situations where I felt like people don't expect persons with disabilities to fall in love, to marry, to be in a relationship, to date, to have sex. These are kind of very taboo thoughts. These are very taboo ideas when it comes to disabled people, according to many people in society, because in Sri Lanka, like, just like there are so many other taboo subjects, I think you have covered so many in your show. But, so yeah, disability and dating is also surely one of them.
We are people end of the day, right? Regardless of what, I don't know,
like configuration you come in,
whether we can see or can't see, whether we have a limb or don't have, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions are pretty much wired the same way. So why do you think it's important for people to remember that? And I mean, in your journey,
yeah, no,
can you
it's
just take me through, like, even growing up,
Yeah.
even when were you made to feel extra conscious about the fact that you were different from what is considered normal?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question, Shanuki, because I remember when I was much younger, just, before going to nursery school or anything, in my family environment, it was just, Niluka is Niluka. I had no idea that I was different in any way in that environment. And it's only when I started going to nursery school, when the teachers were like, oh, you can't play with the other kids, you have to sit separately, that I started thinking, oh, is there something wrong with me? And not only are you made to feel the difference, but the difference is somehow something undesirable, because you learn to be cornered, or to be treated as of a lesser human, a lesser child, in a sense, right? So it's something you learn over time. And in countries like Sri Lanka, with our karmic baggage and our karmic discourses, it is. And I mean, it's very interesting, because when I talk about myself, even for my mother, as a woman, often I feel like there's a lot of mother blaming in our culture as well. Did she have a disability because the mother did something wrong during the pregnancy, or is it your mother's bad karma? And invariably, because of these kind of social situations, I feel like my mom and I have been dragged through the journey together to a great extent. And and when you're small, like now, people would come up and say, oh, you must have done something horrible, you must have like
really? They actually come up to you and say this?
Of course. Lots of people have theories about, oh, you must have, lopped people's arms off in war or something.
What possesses somebody to make comments like that? I don't understand. Please feel free at any point to pipe in.
No, once I just for fun, I went to consult this person who reads past lives, right? And he was like, you would have chopped off other people's eyes. That whole thing. Yeah,
and this is when you were an adult that you went to this person? Or
like about 3 years ago.
Okay.
3 years ago, and it was just for fun. But then, this person actually said it.
It's a very retributive kind of understanding of karma, which is like a topic in and of itself. But this, I think, especially in our culture, the assumption then is that you have done something wrong. They look at you and they see, past misdeed, criminal, whatever. And like, imagine growing up with that sense of constantly being reminded. Like for me, in my late teens, early 20s, I really struggled with feeling like I was a bad person. And I didn't even know where that was coming from. But now I'm like, if you're constantly told you're a bad person and something's inherently like wrong with you, then that becomes your inner voice, and then you spend the next how many years of your life like
Therapy.
in therapy. Yeah.
And also
Or
people treat you, as if you're an object of
pity.
of pity, and that
Pity,
whole
exactly.
unepower mentality, and that whole, yeah.
I think just like toxic positivity, you can have toxic levels of sensitivity also, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I guess even like you said, Niluka, where your teachers were like sort of putting you, isolating you, and
Yeah, this whole special child, and now I'm just as an adult, I'm like, I don't know what kind of varied treatment I needed, just in nursery to play with other kids, but this whole idea that, oh gosh, it's a burden or it's this added responsibility, the way you're viewed, and when that message is transmitted to you in so many different ways, it becomes like the voice in your head.
So, Niluka, when you were growing up, like, okay, at first you're made to feel like you're different and you don't belong or whatever. But then when those teenage hormones hit,
Yeah.
when you start becoming aware of the opposite sex, or you start becoming a little more conscious about wanting to belong, to find love.
Yeah.
There's this concept of even the puppy loves and the crushes and all that. How did you navigate those?
Wanting to be desired, right, is part of being human, wanting to be loved, to be seen for who you are. And you're right, when you're a teenager, you have all these different, crushes, and I think it was difficult for me because I did desire, I did have crushes, but I can remember when I was like maybe about 13, 14, there was this Reader's Digest article, and it basically said that the desirability of a woman was dependent on how symmetrical her body was. And I was just like, I remember reading this and thinking, oh gosh, I could never be beautiful, because I was like, this is the scientific basis of beauty. And I remember that so well because it like really hit me going, wow, no one would, look at me twice because I have this asymmetrical body, So those things, so it leads to this kind of inner conflict. And your friends are like, oh, do you have a crush? And I'm like, do I even want to have a crush? Do I want to talk about it?
Did you feel like you deserved to have it after all that being put in your head? Were you scared to have a crush on anyone?
Hesitant, I would say. That obviously doesn't stop you from wanting to be in a loving relationship, right? But you're always second guessing and you're thinking, even if someone says you're beautiful, like I'm much more comfortable in my skin now as an adult, but when I was a teenager, if someone said, Niluka, you're beautiful, I'd be like, this person's bullshitting or has some hidden agenda,
Yeah. And I think there's another thing that's not too different from just being generally a girl anyway.
Yeah.
There's always this thing of what do they want? Why are they thinking like that? Yeah. What about you, Ishan? I mean, you went to a Colombo private boys' school, and boys can be quite, shall we say, hormone-driven.
Right.
At a certain age, they're adolescents and all
Yes.
that. There's all these conversations, right, about girls, about dating, about all of that. Like, how did you navigate those years? Like, were you ever made to feel like you can't participate in those conversations, or did you feel that yourself?
So for me, of course, I had a bit of a mixed experience. I initially went to I went to a segregated school, like School for the Blind, Ratmalana. And then after that, I went to, the private boys' school. And that, of course, was a kind of a cultural shift, culture shock, whatever you call it. Like, those guys.
Out of a bubble.
Yeah, I was getting out of a bubble and I was getting into something completely different. And, they were talking about girls, partying, dating, and, clubbing and all of that. And that was something new to me. That was like magic. I didn't know what to make of it. And,
was it exciting or scary? Like,
it was kind of exciting also in a way. It was not scary, but, sometimes certain, from those days I had this thing like, when people make very sexist comments and all kind of, I didn't, approve of such comments. So like, I just kept it to myself. But
that must have been very hard in a Sri Lankan boys' school to stay quiet with the sexist comments.
Yes, it was. But then I kind of, kept my cool. But then, so crushes and all that, of course, I started to develop, when I was in university. I had like so many crushes and, I think I had like about 4 or 5 many crushes at the same time. And, it was sweet. Like to think of it now. it was sweet. And sometimes like now my wife, like I'll talk about it later, like I'll talk about my relationship with her properly. But then like now she says, Ishan, what you did was you had crushes on so many people, but you ended up going and singing at their weddings. So
That's because you were meant to wait for her.
yes, that's what she says too.
There you are.
Yeah. So yeah.
But as a sort of a young boy having these crushes and all that, were you made to feel conscious of the fact that people thought you were different? Did that stop you from going and expressing your crushes?
Actually, yes. Like, I felt like if I expressed myself to a girl, she might reject. Like, so, okay, these are very good friends, right? So, like, what I would...
And this is also things that a lot of other boys also go through, right?
Yeah, the fear of rejection. Fear of rejection.
Yeah.
So, like, I also felt like, okay, I'm a blind person. And, she might say, okay, let's just be friends and, whatever. And that I didn't want to go through that situation.
Did you ever feel rejected in romantic relationships because of the fact that you were blind? Or
no, not really. Like, I haven't had that experience, but it's all in my head. So, so yeah, like, I just felt like, no, I might not ask this girl. And, like, yeah, so that's how I passed, that's how I passed on from crush to crush.
What
Yes.
about you, Niluka? What was the dating journeys like?
Dating journey. So it's very interesting.
Homo.
Well, it's very interesting, and this is like a theory that I'm putting out there. So all the while, growing up as a teenager in kind of, Sri Lanka, where the expectation is that the guy asks you out, or, someone else, you wait for someone else to make the first move. And no one really asked me out like in school. And then I went to university in the US. The first day of university, like someone asked me out. And I was just like, is this a joke? What's going on? And it was funny because when I was, and I've spent quite a few years abroad, like in terms of my lifespan. And I've never had like issues with people, like saying, hey, I like you, or going out or having relationships. And funnily, I've never dated a Sri Lankan in my entire life. No, it's just that it's never happened, It's not, I just, well, it's kind of like, you could, it's just happened to be that way. And then I wondered, like, what is it? Is this a disability thing? Is it a cultural thing that, working with quite a lot of women with disabilities, like in our country, like we're not seen as potential mothers, as potential partners, as potential, wives. All these socially validated roles are usually not associated with us, So I think not just being a disabled person, but sort of woman with disabilities in this specific cultural context also carries a lot of baggage, The idea of being a burden, not being able to be, because the expectation is that you as a wife or mother are the carer of the family. And if the assumption is that you need to be cared for, so...
Did any guys just take the chance to get to know you?
Yeah, I don't know. So that's a question out there to all.
You didn't give them a chance.
I'm just like, good question, comment below.
Okay, so was there a difference in your interaction between men in Sri Lanka and men? Like, forget being in romantic relationships with them, but did you feel that, was it you, like Ishan said, it's all in his mind, did you feel like it was you putting out this vibe of, I'm not seen as whole in Sri Lanka, therefore, or did you feel that consciously coming at you from guys?
That's an interesting question. I think, especially I felt less judged in certain other countries, and more at ease with myself, like in my own skin. So maybe that then does transpire into the way, I present myself as well. But it's something that continues to baffle me. And I don't know if I want to pinpoint one specific reason and say this is why it is, but it just happens to be my personal experience.
Okay. And Ishan, when did you first ask a girl out? Was it your wife the first time, or?
Yeah, it was my wife actually. So
how did that conversation navigate? Did you know her for a long time? Or?
So what happened was, okay, it was a very interesting incident. Back in 2019, I was working for an NGO working on reconciliation. And, just after the Easter Sunday attacks, we organized a meeting of civil society organizations and activists. We invited many people, and, I invited this guy called Ian, like he's a very good friend of mine. And he was like, okay, Machang, I'll come. And he ended up not coming. So he was representing this thing called No to 225, like this whole political movement, right? So, and then, so what happened was, instead of him, he sent a representative. And that happened to be this girl. And, she was like, hi, bye, that's it. And then, I don't know, initially I felt attracted to her name.
Okay.
I don't know for which, why, what was the reason behind it? I have no idea up to this day.
So you didn't have like a sort of an in-depth conversation or anything? Because I'm curious to know, like, the attraction, if she didn't talk to you and if you didn't know what.
Yeah,
what sort of
we didn't talk per se. Like, we just had like a, 1 to 2 minute conversation about what the meeting, and, okay, Ishan, just let me know if you need any help with your work. That kind of conversation. And then she had sent me a message on Facebook, which I saw later. Like, it has gone to the spam folder.
Okay.
And then after that, we just started chatting, and, we exchanged numbers, and we spoke, and then the rest is history.
And how long were you dating? Well,
so, yeah, exactly. So, we were dating for about a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I remember I saw your wedding announcement on Facebook. And
Yes.
I was like, whoa, Ishan got married. That's
Yeah,
cool. I didn't
yeah.
even know he was dating anyone.
Right.
So I was so happy for you. But I want to know
course.
what that process is like. Wait, what did you feel like when you, just tracking back to your school days, when you said guys said things like, only an ugly girl will fall for you. How did that make you feel? Like, did you say anything back to that?
I just kind of processed. I just, not exactly school. Like, if it was like schoolboy talk, I would have understood. But this was actually said by some, people who are in high places. So, like, yeah. So, yeah. So, but then, dating as a person with a disability is very, very difficult in Sri Lanka. Like,
Tell me what's the difficulty? Like,
so,
I
like, okay, when you guys date, what you usually do is, you go to a nice restaurant or like some nice place or whatever. So we also do the same thing, but then sometimes people give looks and people think of, okay, like, and like sometimes we feel like we don't have enough privacy. Like those issues are there, and
You're conscious that people are giving you looks? How do you know
I have been told.
Oh, okay.
I have been told. Like sometimes, okay, just forget my wife. Even if I hold hands with another female friend and just go on the road, people give looks. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't have to be blind for that to happen. Also, I think
Yes.
in this country.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like dating was not easy. Like we found it extremely difficult to find a place where we can have like privacy. Just to make love, just to be happy. Like but then
And
things
with
turned out.
family, was that ever like a conversation where maybe your families were, this can go up to either of you, were so protective of you that they didn't want you to be sort of misused or didn't want anybody to take advantage of you? Did you ever have these times when your family members might not have believed that you would be happy and you would find love in your life?
So it's like this, so Shavini, like when she started the relationship with me, of course her mom didn't approve of it initially. She had like, of course, naturally they had these feelings, okay, how can you live with a person with a disability? Like, these are normal Sri Lankan thoughts, right? So, but then after some time, after she also got to know me, and after like even my family, like they were wondering, okay, why is this girl dating him? what's in it for her. But after some time, after about
What do you mean?
like in the sense like why is she dating a person with a disability? Like that thought was there. Like even though no one spoke out as such, I felt it that way. But then after some months, both families reconciled, and they knew that we are basically happy and a match made in heaven. So yeah.
Oh, that's lovely, Shan.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, I think my family has been super supportive, like from the day I was born, really, and very progressive in their thoughts. And in that sense, I've never felt that they, really held back at any point. They never said, okay, you can't have these dreams of, dating or getting married. Or I've never felt any of those restrictions imposed upon me growing up. But I know for a lot of like some friends of mine, women with disabilities, there is that fear, would you be exploited? You're seen as vulnerable being a woman with a disability in our country. So fortunately, I didn't have that kind of protectionistic approach from my parents, but it's very interesting, again, Sri Lankan mothers, they're like, okay, let's find one for our daughter. They do that. I have two sisters. They've tried, finding people for my sisters too. And I remember one day I was like on the computer and, she had typed out this marriage ad, the proposals. And it was something along the lines of, whatever pretty girl, whatever, blah, 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 and with a minor defect. And I remember it was hilarious. I was like, it's like you're selling something, on eBay and you're like, my product has a minor defect. And I remember getting really mad at my mother. And I was like, why would you put this in a proposal? My daughter has a minor defect. But then I was like, well, that is how it works in this whole marriage economy we have, like with the dowries. And I know once I heard my one of my aunts saying, oh, what if you give, more of a dowry, then they'd want to marry? And I was just like, this totally put me off the whole thing, completely, right? But that is the way in which it's still perceived, and that's a reality in our country.
Yeah. No, I mean, we keep making excuses for what we don't think fits the ideal kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I think it happens to all of us in some way or the other. I don't think... I don't know. I'm sure people with disability are just as prejudiced sometimes as anybody else. Right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's also something that, I mean, even if you're self-prejudiced, sometimes because we're brought up to be that way, right? But what about, if I may ask, what about things like sex? Is there ever an additional anxiety about because having sex with somebody is another additional level of vulnerability, right? You're exposing yourself in more ways than one, right? It's not just about your sass or your attitude or your charisma anymore, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk me through, what's it been like?
Yeah, no, that's a really important question because, like I said, when you grow up with this notion that you're not beautiful, do you really want to be seen by someone? Do you really want to be seen naked? Do you want to be told that you're desirable? All these things become points of contradiction in your mind. And I think when I was younger, that was the case. And I remember my first sexual experience wasn't actually a very pleasant. It was a very unpleasant experience for me. And that, that also then kind of influences the way you approach your own sexuality and having in terms of intimacy, I remember very distinctly because I had an unpleasant experience before, feeling oh gosh, I'm safe with this person. Firstly, that was such an important thing to realize, and I feel seen by this person and I really feel loved by this person. And it was you have other relationships, you move on in life, but that moment of someone really embracing you for who you are, it's something that will always stay with me, and I think that's why when we talk about sexuality and disability, about really being seen and being desired, and also desiring and having what we desired, it makes such a difference.
Were you ever conscious of that, Nishan? Did you ever feel anxious?
So it's like
This is
this.
the first time
Before I met Shavini, to be very honest with you, I was afraid of sex.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what exactly was expected of me, and I think the disability factor played a role. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I was afraid of sex. But then she kind of gently and gradually kind of made me to realize that sex is not something. Sex is not a crime. Sex is not something which hurts, or it's not a big deal, right?
Shana, I can really empathize with what you're saying. That sense of shame, I mean, whether you have a disability or not, like, there's so much shame around, sex and
Can you
you,
match up to the expectations?
exactly.
Yes,
and
exactly.
oh, am I doing
Yeah.
something bad? Is
Bad,
it
yeah.
immoral? What will my parents think? All these kind of
Exactly,
things
exactly.
that go
Yeah,
into
yeah.
it, and I think it's really for me. So there is this organization called Sins Invalid in the US, right? So
Right.
this my boyfriend at that time, the same person I was talking about earlier.
Right.
So we were in San Francisco, and he took me to one of their shows, right? And this is like a very powerful disability justice based disability arts collective. And they had people with disabilities on stage being really sexy and sexual. And I remember going, oh my God, this is like blowing my mind, because this is totally not exactly. And I, at one point, I was like, it was discomfort and excitement both at the
Right,
same time. And
right.
I was like, I wish this flow would swallow me up, because I feel so uncomfortable. But it was like such a life
You were the
changing.
brown auntie in the room.
Exactly. I was the brown auntie in the room. And it was just, it really transformed the way I looked at disability and sexuality after that, because for them to reclaim their sexuality like that and be so hot on stage, and I was like, these people have disabilities and they're really hot, and that is so powerful. And that was one of those key points in my life when I realized this is so important. And that's why I think it's great that we're having this conversation.
Of course.
I don't
Of
think
course.
society sees persons of disability as being those with sexual needs. Right? Have you ever felt that, okay, now Ishan, when you say you're married, have you had any questions, uncomfortable questions that people throw at you? Or when people know that you're in a relationship with you, have you ever been made to feel like, how come? I know you said like that the families were a little uncomfortable at first and all that, Ishan.
Yeah. But now, of course, they're
Now,
super comfortable.
do you all have to deal with questions? Do you feel like there are people who...
Yeah, it's
Are
like...
you surprised that people are even sort of questioning the fact that you might have feelings and you might want love and sex in your life?
So, like, I think now, like, I think this is something which every, ordinary, even non-disabled people get just after marriage. What about kids?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, people ask us, like, are you guys planning to have kids? All of that. So, but then, we just want to do it on our own pace. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I've never necessarily felt judged for being in relationships. Again, as most of my relationships have been in different social contexts, I don't know what it would be, let's say like dating someone here. But I think, and this is a question I want to ask Ishan, whether it's actually different for guys, right? Because I also had a close friend, and when he was, with his partner, people would be like, oh, is this your sister?
So, like...
Yeah, is this your like carer?
Yeah.
Or something?
So even sometimes, like,
Yeah.
we both have our wedding rings, right? And like, we just go to sometimes we go to supermarkets and all that. The people are very nice to us, like sometimes extra nice, and they are like, they ask Shavini, is this your brother? Like, so like they can't imagine, a non-disabled person and a disabled person being married and, being together,
Exactly.
Does she
and-
have to deal with a lot of questions?
Sorry?
Does she have to deal with a lot of questions after that? Is there sort of... I don't know, there's this sort of... I don't know whether it's unfair. I think it's unfair, and I'm sorry it's not. But if you're with somebody who has a disability, that people think you're doing something good.
Oh, yeah. My goodness, yes. Great lady. Yeah, she gets all these
She's-
comments. Great lady. My goodness. Yeah, like, so just
So
after
it's
our
almost like
wedding.
you're doing something extra, making an extra effort just to be a saint. Like,
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
just after our wedding, when we put out some wedding photos, people were commenting, she's such a great lady. Like, as if this whole thing is some, meritorious deed.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
so
so-
true. I remember when we
Yeah.
were doing a focus group once. So it was about a man without disabilities being married to a woman with disabilities, and then they were like, "Yeah, bodhisattvik wage,"
Right.
as if this is some kind of penance. This is some kind of like trial that he's going through to collect merit, and I was like laughing in my
And
head.
the best thing is, like, okay, I sometimes just take it easy and like, I'm like, okay, fine, what are these people talking? But, she properly takes offense. Like, she's like, okay, no, this is
Yeah.
not done. This is not right. So like, yeah, like she's like, Ishan, I'm just, your partner and, I just love you and I just love you for your looks and, and she's like, your disability means nothing to me. So, yeah.
And but let's talk about other forms of disability. It might not be visual impairment or it might not be missing a limb. There are non-visible disabilities, right, that we have to deal with also in society. Because both of you have been disability rights advocates, maybe you'll have an insight into that more than I would. That when it comes to things like relationships, there's so much fear about who you're getting into a partnership with, right? At least now with the two of you, your minds are considered supernormal, I would say. Like the intelligence is there, the ability to have the conversation, the charisma, the charm, but sometimes, people who are afflicted with more mental disabilities, it might be far more difficult to be accepted. Have you ever in your work come across instances where this conversation around falling in love, fears or even, I don't know, issues with self-worth around that?
Yeah, no, this is a very important question, and even when it comes to like the legal capacity of persons to consent, and when you look at persons with learning related disabilities or intellectual disabilities, and the thing is, the reality is that we live in such a society that added vulnerability, I think, structurally is there, right? Especially when I work with deaf women and women with hearing impairments, not being able to, represent themselves, testify in courts, to get that police and other aid that they need, structurally. So I'm not saying just by the virtue of you being a woman with a disability, you're vulnerable, but structurally you're rendered vulnerable, right? So I understand why some parents might, be very concerned about, especially, maybe their daughters and even children in general, right? With disabilities. And I think also for a lot of people, this idea, like in Sri Lanka, it's like marriage is like your social security system, right? Like your safety net, right?
Yes.
So if my child doesn't get married, who's going to take care of them once we pass away? So these kind of things, working with parents with disabilities, especially, persons with invisible disabilities, these sentiments often get conveyed, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't have consensual, and happy and blissful relationships, okay? I mean, in many other countries, there are supported decision-making models, right? For us, a lot of us, I mean, Ishan and I are here sitting in this room, but if you look at a majority of persons with disabilities in our country, they're in homes, right?
Yes.
In
Yes,
institutions.
institutions,
I mean, we can't even have this conversation. How can you even think about dating, in an institutional setting? Where's the privacy? Where's that opportunity to meet people? Where's the space for intimacy? Where's the space for any kind of
You're just
agency?
exhibits.
Exactly. Like, leave aside sexual agency. So it's there's so much more there. I mean, Ishan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, so, okay, talking about persons with disability, like say men and women with disabilities, like I have seen this thing where, women with disabilities, especially persons with physical disability, like, wheelchair users and, such people, like they are being highly sexualized, like sometimes, people think of them as if, they are sexual objects or whatever. Like, whereas men who are wheelchair users, who are, using clutches, or people, who are deaf or whatever, I mean, people like with visible disabilities, and also even sometimes invisible, mental disabilities, men are not considered attractive.
I think
You
that's
know?
because this concept that's perpetuated about that alpha male
Yeah.
Yes,
ideal
yes,
kind
indeed,
of thing,
indeed,
right?
yeah,
That a woman
exactly.
being weak and in need of help
Yeah.
is okay.
Is okay,
In a
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
The effeminacy associated with men with disabilities, right? And also, I mean, I was doing this research on veterans with disabilities. We've had a war, and disability is a reality of that war that we
Of
don't
course.
even talk about really, and it needs that attention. But the concept that, for the Ranaviruas, the heroes, getting married, these women are like really patriotic women who are serving their country by being brides of, veterans with disabilities. So the discourse when it comes to that dating, like Ishan very correctly said, is very gendered as well.
And you feel like patronized in a way to a certain extent. Can you tell me, Ishan, at the moment, okay, now both of you have come into your own. You are strong, capable individuals who know your rights and who are fighting for the rights of others. But do you find that you're still struggling? Or have you actually, you're fine with who you are? Do you still wish you were different? Do you wish your life was different? Or do you think that this is actually a gift that helps you
Right.
be sort of open and advocate and prove people wrong?
So yeah, like for me, of course, my disability, like I just always say that I happen to be disabled. I'm just a normal human being with normal needs, and just going about doing my daily work. But it's just that I have my blindness to deal with. But then yeah, like I wish the country situation and the society was more accessible and more welcoming of persons with disabilities, for which of course me and even Niluka, we are tirelessly working in whichever capacity we are. But yeah, I wish things were a bit more different, so that we don't have to do all these all this stuff which we are doing right now. So
Yeah, I think I'm going to be really, really honest with this question, right? So you see me and you see my physical disability, but I also have a long-term psychosocial disability, which I've been like managing for many years now. And it's very interesting because, in terms of the choices I make or the aspirations I have, your doctors say, oh, there is a likelihood that you could genetically transmit, this illness, let's say, to your child, right?
May
So
I know what the psychosocial
I have schizoaffective disorder. So the thing is, this belief that there is then a genetic propensity for, let's say, your kids, and even with physical disabilities, right? So for me, it was never an issue. The physical disability, like, it doesn't even register in my mind. I'm like, I don't care if I have 10 babies without arms, like they are going to grow up to be fantastic, right? Because that has been my experience of my physical disability. But when it comes to my experience of a psychosocial disability, where I really have struggled and suffered so much, been through like shit. And there was one point when I was like, oh gosh, I never want to have kids because I don't want anyone to suffer this way, So the thing is, not to say that disability is suffering or psychosocial disability is suffering, but there is sometimes that element, of the lack of control, or even like disability, the social experience of discrimination, until for me. So with the psychosocial disability, now I'm at a much better pace in my life where I'm more balanced, right? And there's more, routine and kind of wholesomeness in my life. And so then I'm not thinking like that anymore. But the thing is that those your experiences, let's say on the basis of not having an arm, if I was like severely bullied, and I would be like, no, I don't want anyone else to experience this, right? So it then comes back to what is the experience that people with disabilities have, right? Because in terms of depression, in terms of a lack of wellness. If you're constantly exposed to these challenges, that is what you're going to associate disability with, right? And why it's important to talk about disabled people being whole, being sexual, is that and attractive or desirable, whatever you want to call it, is that then you shift that narrative. And so then being a person with a disability, whether visible or not, doesn't have to be some kind of death sentence,
Exactly.
But in your struggle with your psychosocial disability, has that ever affected your relationship, your dating life?
Yeah, I think so. It really does. And that's why I thought
In what way? Is it like...
I guess it's about maybe if you have, like, let's say, an episodic kind of psychosocial disability, having a partner that understands that, sometimes maybe you're not going to be at your best, and sometimes you might go through periods of depression, and this is what it means to love a person who may not like show up happy in the morning saying, honey, I love you every day, kind of thing, right? It's kind of something you need to work on. And I think it's true of any relationship, whether you have a disability or not, trying to figure out the quirks of your partner and what makes them tick and doesn't, so just, I guess, in a sense. And sometimes I think like looking back at being severely depressed, and I'm just thinking sometimes maybe it has been really tough on my partners, right? Because it's not like a joyride. But I also think that kind of need for authenticity can potentially also strengthen relationships. And I think, like, it's just being able to navigate. It's a negotiation at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
May I ask you both, and this is veering a little bit away from the dating and relationships thing. Niluka, as I mentioned, the first time I saw you, you had a hook that you used to kind of talk about changing narratives about, what you associate with the hook. To ask you, is there any reason that you have chosen not to wear a prosthetic, which could potentially ease your capabilities? I don't know, because you've managed so well for so long, maybe you don't need it. Or maybe ease somebody else's sentiment. And is there any reason you, Ishan, choose not to use a white cane, for instance, and you just get about life anyway?
Yeah, okay. So, shall I answer? Yeah, okay.
Please.
So, white cane, of course, I have had, a training on, how to use a white cane and all that. But in Sri Lanka, I choose not to because there are so many prejudices around using a white cane. The moment you are seeing a blind person with a white cane, you have so many prejudices. Like, you think about this person as, okay, this person is an object of pity. You need to, look at this person and see if some kind of charitable, some kind of charitable help can be done or whatever. So, like, white cane is always associated with things like charity, like, keywords like charity, poverty, disability, all of that. So I just choose not to use a white cane just so that, people don't look at me in that angle. And also, talking about the white cane, I also must talk about the glasses that I'm wearing. I'm wearing normal, glasses, and usually blind people wear dark glasses. If you have observed, blind people wear dark glasses. Yeah. But I don't, because, so there's a story, when I was small, I certainly, when I was small, I didn't wear glasses, and I used to go in public transport with my dad to school, and he gets all these questions to the effect that is he blind since birth? What can be done? Can he be taken to some kind of doctor? Like, these questions really embarrasses him and puts him into in a difficult spot. So what he chose to do was he wanted me to wear glasses so that no one would initially notice that I am a person with a disability. No one would initially notice that I am blind. So whereas when you wear dark glasses, that's an indication that you are blind. So those symbolisms actually matter. So
yeah, I think this whole notion of stigma how like overt identifiers of disability are very stigmatized in our country, and even like stigma by association, like your dad having to explain to other people, and like for me, for my parents, especially my mom, also having to explain to other people. So that said, then here my decision not to pass or hide my disability with a prosthetic is really for me a very personal decision based on my sense of freedom and functionality, right? So if I wear a prosthetic arm, it's going to be like this appendage, like having a little log, and I use this little arm a lot. Like even when I talk, I know I use it, right? So then that functionality is missing. And the other thing is this, my palm, it's like a little malformed, right? So about to be formed kind of palm is what I had, and I have when I have these 5 little fingers, and it's really sensitive, right? And I use this to have my tactile experience with the world. Like my idea of my body is very much also inclusive of the sensory experience of my little arm. So when I wear like a prosthetic arm, that gets cut off, right? And then that's then something I was like, no, I want to have it. But from a young age, like my grandparents, very lovingly, because they didn't want me to, be treated different. It was like, Niluka, always wear like long sleeve clothes. Let's wear this prosthetic. When you're older, you can wear a sari. No one will notice. And I think for me also, it was a form of like rebellion when I was like a teenager, when my parents or grandparents were like, oh, don't wear t-shirts, and I'm like, I am going to wear a t-shirt. And now I'm like less kind of gung-ho about it, because as you grow older, you're not really as interested in defying parental or grandparental advice. But I think for a lot of people, I feel it would make others more comfortable. So that I remember this experience, Cinnamon Grand, how when you come to the entrance and you open the door and the entrance is there. It was a couple of years ago. This like uncle came running, right? And I hadn't even got out of the car. And then he was like, oh my God, do you know there are prosthetic arms? And I was like, wait a minute, who are you? Random
My God, okay.
Yeah. And it's like, I am from India, and in India we have prosthetic arms. I was like, in Sri Lanka also we have prosthetic arms. But he was like baffled as to why anyone in their right sense of mind would not want to wear a prosthetic arm. And I was like, I just don't, and I was like, maybe you will feel more comfortable in my presence. But for me, it is not. And here I'm not saying that people should wear or shouldn't wear, but it's like a personal preference. But you're right.
Yeah.
But it's something that is seen as counterlogical by some,
And in relationships, have you ever been made to feel by the other person? Have you ever been made to feel extra conscious of your disability? Either of you? Even if you were like on a date or anything?
Not as in for me, or like I didn't get the question.
Like has the person you've been with
Mm-hmm.
in your dating history,
Mm-hmm.
has the member of your partner or whoever you were on a date with, or someone you were trying to impress,
Mm-hmm.
have they ever made you feel uncomfortable or more conscious of your disability?
Not me. Not me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's, for me, in that sense, relationships have helped me to actually be more accepting of my disabilities. If my partner, holds my hand and not just sits hand and goes like, I love you. I remember the first time, my partner did that, and I was like, oh my gosh, you are seeing this part of me and you're loving this part of me as well, and that left such an impression. And when you are so loved wholly, and this is where relationships are important, you also learn to love yourself, and you're like, this is not something that I need to hide. It's not that I'm being desired in spite of, but because of, wholly as I am. So that way it's, it's been a process.
And I think that's very nice. What you said is it's being loved not in spite of, but because of, is something that I think all of us,
Yes.
whatever we are, disabled or non-disabled, we all want that. And I think
Absolutely.
You two have been luckier than most of us, right? That privilege of, I think, I'm so happy for you, and I'm a little jealous. Let me say that. It's very difficult actually for anyone to find people who don't notice your flaws, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good one. This is what my mom said. She said you wouldn't have, when I was a little girl, right? She never said that I shouldn't have relationships, but she said you'll never have to deal with crap because only people who are genuinely interested in you and love you for who you are will come to you. So, you know, she never dissuaded me and said, oh, you're not dating or whatever, but she's like, be patient because by virtue of who you are more likely to attract more genuine people, is what she used to say. When we started our conversation, the question was like normalcy, right? And what's normal, what's abnormal, who's abnormal. And I think normalcy is a very kind of problematic place from which to view anybody, right? Like at the end of the day, who is normal? And for me, it's about, you know, recognizing human variation in all its different forms. I remember when I was a kid, you know, when I started getting into disability politics, again, I was like 13. And I remember asking my mother this question, right? I said, why are we called disabled people, right? This whole concept of disqualified. Is it like someone who's disqualified from a race? Are we disqualified from, you know, life kind of thing, right? And it used to bother me when I was younger. But I think as I grew older and I started to associate more persons with disabilities, and honestly, initially, as a teenager, I was very torn because I you know, used to be a hyperachiever and I used to pass and no one, you know, like I went to regular schools and disability wasn't something that factored in, and I didn't want to talk about it because it's such a kind of taboo topic, or there's so much, you know, unease attached to it. And for a long time, I struggled as to whether I want to even identify with the disability community or not, right? When I could be a successful person just on my own steam. That's how I used to think, right? And then really coming into being with, you know, other persons with disabilities and realizing how common our struggles were, you know, and that this is not a personal issue, it's a societal, structural issue, and that disability is not the dirty word, it's the way disability has been conceptualized and treated, you know. And like we reclaim words like queer or gay, or, you know, reclaiming disability and just being like, no, I'm proud of it. Hello, you know, there's nothing wrong with this. Exactly. And exactly. And it's part of who I am, and deal with it. You know, you can love me for it or not, kind of thing. So I think it's really that sense of self-acceptance and being okay with who you are. I mean, how has it been for you, Ishan?
For me, of course, okay. So like I, you know, of course, you and I share this common belief that disability is not inability, and you know, also, like, you know, what Shavini always says is, you know, before I started the relationship with you, I stalked you, and like, you know, so she has basically stalked me online and found out about my rowing career and all that, and you know, she has kind of, you know, fallen in love with all of that, and then you know, just after marriage, you know, I still remember this incident. Just after marriage, we did a program for a YouTube channel, and then it got a lot of publicity and it got a whole lot of comments. And you know, some comment, like, you know, many comments were very nice and congratulatory and all that, but some comments were to the effect that, okay, this girl married this guy for the money. You know, that you know, like, okay, marriage between a disabled person and non-disabled person cannot happen in their minds, you know. So like, what I would say to, you know, people who are watching, you know, this show is, you know, it's a completely normal experience. It's you know, there's not even a difference. You know, you can't call it normal or abnormal. It's just one of those experiences in life, you know. So yeah, like for me and Shavini, it has been you know, a very interesting journey. And of course, for me, as you know, as you said, Niluka, like, as far as I am concerned, you know, disability has been, you know, something which is, you know, which is a part of me, and I'm proud of my disability. And but then, you know, like, life is something which we need to enjoy after all. So yeah,
And love is something that we all deserve to enjoy.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, I'm hoping that this episode is going to open the eyes of not only the non-disabled people, but any persons with disability who are watching this episode who may have been conditioned to give up on the fact that they can find love, or maybe think that they should be grateful if someone loves them. I hope that as much as we talked about disability, that we were also talking about a lot of the same thing that everybody goes through. Those feelings, those anxieties, those struggles, that self-worth issues, shocking your friends or, or surprising others, having to sort of challenge social norms. These are not things that are simply, limited to just people of disability. And of course, that's not by any means to be dismissive of the struggles or the challenges. But if we can just sort of close up by saying, okay, when it comes to enjoying relationships as a person with disabilities, what are the kind of facilities that society should have? It's almost like we seem to think that if we have books in Braille, we tick the box, everything's taken care of.
Yes.
Or you have a ramp. Yay!
Oh yeah.
Right? But what are the things that people with disability really need to live fulfilled lives in relationships, even to be able to go out on a date, to enjoy time together?
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of dignity, right? Like human worth and dignity. And yes, it's very important to talk about access. It's important to have accessible buildings, transportation. And often what happens is when we talk about disability rights, the focus tends to be on these very kind of public aspects of disability. But when you see the social, emotional aspects, the affective kind of angle of disability, that tends to be kind of brushed aside as a more kind of private issue, a case by case issue. Whereas when it comes to our inherent dignity, it really isn't, And I think, that requires, and that's why this show is so important, to create that societal shift that you can go out on a date, with another person, either with a disability or without a disability, and not be stared at, not be accosted and asked all these multiple questions of whether it's your aunt, your uncle, or whatever, right? Because, no one wants that when they're having, intimate time with their partners, not being, assumed that, let's say you're checking into a hotel with your, husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, and assumption that, oh, okay, so 2 single beds, why isn't that assumption made, as with many mainstream couples, that you're in a relationship of whatever form, so it really, for me, is you need a shift in the way disability in terms of human wholeness is viewed in, so that it leads to this almost like heart level shift. That's what I feel. Ishan, what do you think?
Yeah, so what I would say is, of course, as I said early in the conversation, of course, there needs to be some certain facilities so that persons with disabilities, when they go on a date or, when they go out with, they just need to have that sense of privacy, and also they need to be comfortable and, I need to feel that, no one's looking at me or judging me or, quote unquote, giving me looks or that whole thing. So, that's something that I wish would happen in this country. But anyway, there's another different aspect also, which I just wanted to touch on, which is, affection and, love making, expressing love and all those things in public is viewed as something which is, not right and all that. But, violence is completely okay, So, what I would say is, we need a society, we need to strive to create a society in which, instead of violence, love is okay in public and celebrated.
In whatever form that comes in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining this episode, and I hope it has opened your eyes, hearts, sensitivities to the fact that we ourselves need to check our prejudices. We ourselves sometimes need to check our privileges, and we also need to check each other's and call each other out if we feel that we are being unfair to each other in any form or way. And all of us deserve love and will find love if we don't feel like we have it already. We just need to keep those hopes up and keep believing, because I think we can manifest a lot of things with our own self positivity, even though the world tries to get us down.